Hey, how's it going, everybody? If you're new here, welcome in. And if you've been here before, welcome back. I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And the box in front of me today is a knife that I've been wanting to check out for a year. That's right, it's been a whole year. Shout out to Blade Ops for lending me the Kershaw live wire. That's right, we talked about OTFs, and here's the thing, I can't make a video about an OTF knife without this knife being mentioned. So Blade Ops, thank you for making this possible. Now that we've got the sound effects out of the way, let's go ahead and, oh man, that's so freaking good. And guys, here's the deal. It's an OTF made by Kershaw here in the United States of America. And when we're talking about OTF knives, there's two things that we really need to keep in mind. The first is that no matter where they are built, they are more expensive to make than a regular folding locking knife, and so they always cost more. Don't believe me? Just go take a look at the knife that knife was built to compete against, the microtech ultratech. Ultratechs used to be in the mid $200 range, and then they just kept getting more and more expensive. Now, I believe the top end for microtech ultratech is somewhere in the range of $300, $400, and for a specialized version, maybe even close to $500. And fans of OTF knives are not going to shy away from that because that's what they're used to for a premium American-made OTF. Now, you could also go with an OTF where all the parts are made in China and then it's brought over here to the US and assembled here in the US, but then you're typically still looking at a more expensive price. For example, this is the SOS Knives OTF, and its parts are made in China. It's assembled here, and this costs $99. It's got D2 and aluminum, and you might be used to seeing D2 at a $25, $30, $40 price point, but on an OTF knife, $99 is still very much at the low end of that budget. I was extremely impressed with this knife at that price point. But we're not here to talk about the SOS Knives OTF or the microtech ultratech. I'm excited to talk about this one, and man, I'm starting to see why everybody was raving about this knife when it released last year. The first thing that I'm noticing right away is just how easy that trigger is. And I call it a trigger because you are deploying it. And what I've noticed on OTF knives that have an easy deployment is that usually it's followed by a lackluster action. That's not the case at all. This fires every bit as hard as my microtech ultratech. The difference is that I'm pretty sure my grandma could actually deploy the Kershaw live wire. That's fantastic. There is absolutely no strain to deploy that whatsoever. That feels great. The next thing I'm noticing is standardized hardware. That is, well, I believe that is T6 hardware. Yep, that is T6 hardware all the way around. And I'm not necessarily mad at it. Some people might be, because they're going to be saying, Rollshambo, you complain about T6 hardware on everything. So why is it not an issue on the Kershaw Livewire? Guys, it's because it's an OTF. Take it from me, you should not be taking apart your OTF unless you are prepared for it. And by prepared, I mean there's springs in here. Understand that you may not be able to get this back together, and the warranty may not cover it if you just send them a bucket of bolts and parts. I wouldn't rest my laurels on that warranty recovering your disassembly mishaps, so keep that in mind. Another thing that I'm noticing is this pocket clip. That pocket clip is deep carry, but it's not super long, and I actually appreciate that because the longer a pocket clip is, the more likely that it's going to get in the way of the ergonomics. And I like it when a pocket clip is functional, but I also like it when it doesn't mess up the ergos. So many good knives have had their ergos destroyed by an errant pocket clip that was just too freaking large or too long. And in this scenario, it's not. The pocket clip itself is not much to write home about, but it's there, it's deep carry, it gets the job done. While we're looking at that, you'll notice at the top that it is in fact reversible. So you could flip this to the other side and make this completely ambidextrous, right or left pocket carry, no problem. And then with the deployment switch on the back, that makes this Switchblade completely ambidextrous, just like I would consider most Switchblades to be. While we're in this region, let's go ahead and talk about what's missing. Yeah, I don't see one either. And I am, of course, talking about a glass breaker. There's no glass breaker on this. And some of you guys are rejoicing because we've seen so many Switchblades, so many OTF knives with this glass breaker. And let's be honest, the everyday user, the majority of the market does not need a glass breaker 99.9% of the time. I used to be someone that sat behind my camera and complained about it and said, why do we have this? And then that was promptly followed up with plenty of comments from first responders and people that said, yeah, well, you know what? I actually do use it. I'm glad that it is there. And here's my story. That's actually happened several times. And it got me to thinking about it. OTF knives are inherently illegal to carry and use for the average everyday person in a lot of states. You know what they're not illegal for in those states? First responders like police officers and firefighters. You know, the kind of person that would actually use a glass breaker on a more frequent basis. And so in that realm, the glass breaker does make sense to me on knives like the microtech, ultratech, but as an everyday user, I don't necessarily miss its absence on this one because I'm not going to be using it, and I don't necessarily believe that it's something that I would seriously need on an everyday basis or even once in a great while. It also points to the fact that this knife was designed to be a microtech, ultratech killer. And a lot of that has to do with the price tag. These come in at $239, and you get everything that you want out of an OTF knife. You get a minimalist deep carry pocket clip. You get an easy to deploy blade, which is very snappy and has, it has blade play, but it's very minimal. Remember when I talked about the two things that are very specific to OTF knives, and one of them was that you have to expect some blade play? I know that some of you are going to be hunting in the comment section right now saying,
well, listen, you haven't seen the Grant and Gavin Hawk deadlock.
That is a $1,000+ OTF knife that is very hard to get your hands on and is not indicative of what people can expect out of the market. And I guarantee you, your Guardian Tactical Recon has a little bit of blade play. Your benchmade Infidel has a little bit of blade play. Your microtech, ultratech has a little bit of blade play. How much is a point of pride for a lot of manufacturers that make OTF knives? And this one is very minimal, and it's there, but it's a little bit of side-to-side action. I was going to say it's not actually, it's no different than what you're going to get out of an ultratech. So if you find the play in an ultratech to be acceptable, it's going to be about the same on this one. Now, back and forth, there is no blade play, or rather there is very little. I shouldn't say there's none. There's very little back and forth, which unlike with the SOS Knives OTF, this one actually does have a bit more on the back and forth blade play. This has got to be the easiest switch that I've ever come across. And while it is reminiscent of microtech, ultratech, I wouldn't necessarily call it a clone or a duplicate in any way, shape, or form. It is its own action. It's its own button. It has that really satisfying snap when you deploy it. And it's made out of MagnaCut. Now, here's the deal with MagnaCut. MagnaCut, to get the most out of its edge retention, needs to be heat treated upwards of about 63 plus HRC on the Rockwell hardness. If it's lower than that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the heat treat was done wrong. It just means that you will actually have less edge retention and less toughness. It's very similar to S35VN in that way. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and check out knifesteelnerds.com by Laren Thomas, who, designed MagnaCut. With the higher HRC, it does actually gain more toughness. Now, with the MagnaCut, some of you are saying, well, I can't see a Rockwell hardness figure on Kershaw's website. Guess what? Neither can I. However, word on the street and a widely accepted truth is that these are actually manufactured by Hogue for Kershaw. I don't imagine that to be cheap for them, which blows my mind considering that this has got to be the best value for an American-made OTF that I've ever seen. Yes, it is better than the Axial Shift, which comes in at about $50 to $60 more on average, even for a plain Jane version. That makes the Kershaw Livewire seriously the best value. And I don't know why anyone in their right mind would actually go out and buy an ultratech before a Livewire at this point, because this value is insanity. I don't understand how they can make this and sell this and get a profit at the $239 price point. It blows me away. And yes, this one does have a black DLC coated blade, which means that it is actually going to be even more rust resistant and damage resistant. DLC is absolutely amazing. I am really enjoying this one, and I think for $239, if you're looking for a quality American-made OTF, it doesn't get better than this. For the price, this has got to be the best value that I've come across. Now, with all of that being said, guys, I do have to mention that some of you are going to look at this and say, you know what, it might be a reasonable price for an OTF, but I want an OTF and I don't necessarily want to spend $200+. What could you recommend that's less expensive than that? And with that, I would say check out an SOS Knives OTF. They're $99. And if you want to see my full review on this one, almost a year after I got it, go ahead and click on the video that pops up next.